So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the internal rate of return, or IRR. It's a very sort of fundamental concept that you'll learn in most introductory finance courses, and it's really important to know, particularly if you're pursuing careers in higher fields of finance like investment banking or private equity in particular. It's a very sort of fundamental concept, but it really drives home what sort of the process that companies use to evaluate the attractiveness of different investments. So I'm going to be going over this example. But before I do that, like always, I'll just give you sort of my sort of personal explanation of what IRR means. So the IRR, simply put, is the rate of return or the cost of capital that you can use, which will end up making your net present value equal to zero. So I'll repeat that again. It's the rate of return, it's the cost of capital that you can use, which will make discounting back all your cash flows and subtracting the initial value, it'll make all of that equal to zero. So let's see, we're going to be dealing with the same example I used in a previous video. So the rolling supply company is considering an expansion project with cash flows as shown below. I've typed them out over here. The cost of capital is 11%. Well, they give you this cost of capital in the question, but this part of the question, we're not going to be using that. We're actually calculating the cost of capital, the implied cost of capital that makes which makes the NPV zero. So we're going to be calculating the IRR for this project. So like I mentioned before, we need to make sure that the present value of all these cash flows ends up being zero. So, but we don't know what the cost of capital is. So later in this video, I'll actually be going over one of the coolest Excel functions, which actually allows you to, it's called the gold seek function, and it actually allows you to seek out specific values for a specific number that you're looking for. I'll explain what that means in a minute. So as always, first we need to do an Npv calculation. And if you haven't seen my earlier video, I encourage you to go check it out because that sort of goes over the fundamentals of Npv and how that works. So we're just going to skip over that for a second. So we're going to do the Npv of the cash flow. So you have the negative 2400, calculate, divide that by 1 plus. Now this cell is empty, but I'm just going to use that as a reference because later in the video we're going to populate our cost of capital in this cell to the power of, and we'll use this cellular reference. Just going back here, I'm going to add the dollar signs, which makes this a constant reference, and you drag all that down. Perfect. So you'll notice that these numbers don't really make that much sense right now because our cost of capital is empty. So what we'll do is we'll just sum up all these values right now, right here, and we'll see that we have 1700. Now I'm going to highlight this cell as yellow as well, so just easier for viewing. So our goal is to put a number here, the cost of capital, such a number that makes this cell equal to zero, this highlighted cell. So let's imagine we put in 10%. That brings us to 641. What if we put 20%? But that takes us negative. We went too far in the other direction. What if we put 18? It's too high up again. So it's sort of this guessing game that you think you'd have to play. But there actually is a much easier way of doing that because there's no way it would take humanly, it would take a lot of time just to calculate a specific down to the however many decimal places to get a number that would bring this to zero. So here's a really cool Excel function that I encourage you all to use. So select the cell that you're interested in and go to data, this tab right here. And you can go to this tool that Excel has called what if analysis. And underneath that, there's a feature called gold seek. So what it's basically asking you is, you select the cell that you're interested in. For us, it's the cost of capital cell. To change, just going back for a second, my mistake. The actual cell that we're interested in is the sum cell, because that is the one we want to change by pulling this lever. So this is the cell we want to bring to zero, and the lever sort of that we're using to incite that change is the cost of capital. So we want to sell C21 to value. What do we want that cell to be? We want to bring that to zero. But how can we do that? We're changing this cell. So we input all of this and we click OK. Excel is going to do all of its calculation and it found the perfect target. The target value was 0. It brought it to 0. And you'll see that it gave us a cost of capital of 19.5707, like it's incredibly detailed. But what that tells us is that if you use a cost of capital of 19.57, this number right here, your NPV is going to be exactly 0, which is known as the internal rate of return. So that was basically a video going over the IRR and how you can calculate it. Usually, more often than not, this specific number, like this 19.57 we got here, is not easily calculatable just off the top of your head, or even with a calculator at times, specifically when the cash flows are all over the place like they were in this video. So you can use the gold seek function in Excel, which is really helpful, and it gives you a specific number which will bring your NPV to 0, which is your internal rate of return. In one of the other videos, I'm now going to be covering the idea of the profitability index, which is another capital budgeting technique that companies use to evaluate the attractiveness of projects. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.